Is anyone unsure what the Slack thumbs up means?
Thumbs up, fist bump, these mean good, right?
Apparently, though, because I used to use the fist bump all the time, and that's like a face punch, actually.
I really hope people don't think that, because the fist bump is one of my favorite emojis.
As long as we're all collectively agreeing that the thumbs up is sarcasm.
I still like a thumbs up occasionally. It's going to be my big takeaway from this. I should use the thumbs up less.
This episode of Inside the Process is powered by Trainual, the one app that organizes who does what and how. Check it out at trainual.com.
Well, what is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Inside the Process, where we sit down with some of the brightest minds in business to dig into all of their process secrets and best practices to help you continuously improve and level up the work you're doing. I'm Mallory, a 10-year systems and ops veteran turned marketer, and I'm here with Shawn, the super awesome training and dev guy, known around here as Mentor Shawn.
Well, thank you, Mallory. And we get to chat. I love this because we get to chat with some of the absolute coolest people on the whole freaking planet. And this guy is no exception whatsoever. This is Ty Hoesgen, who has transformed from this shy farm boy who feared speaking to a renowned communication coach and a 2-time best-selling author. Ty has helped thousands of professionals to improve their communication skills, and he credits his own success in mastering those skills. So you can check him out on Instagram, on YouTube. I've been all over those recently to hear everything and just start to learn from you a lot more, Ty. And I'm so excited that you're here with us. Ty, welcome to Inside the Process.
Appreciate you having me as a guest. I'm excited.
All right. Well, what do you say? Let's cut straight to the chase, because that's what confident communication is all about, right? If you're tuning in today, chances are you've felt that pit in your stomach when it comes to speaking up. Maybe you've overshared in a Slack message or felt your voice shake during a big presentation. Truth is, we're all communicating constantly, and many of us are falling short often or more often than we'd like to admit. So what should be top of mind for us when it comes to delivering confident and clear messages? And don't be afraid to give us the unfiltered framework that we should all get to know.
Well, there's a famous scene in the show The Office that I really like. Michael Scott, the manager, he says, sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going, but I just hope I find it along the way. It's like an improv conversation, an improvisation. And that's something that I think a lot of us can relate to, where we kind of just start talking, we start answering a question, or explaining something, but we're not really sure where it's going, or sometimes even what our point is. And so if we're not even sure where it's going, and we're not even sure exactly what our main point is, what are other people thinking? How are other people going to be able to get something valuable from that? I remember very vividly, I was once in a meeting early in my career when we're kind of going around the room. There's 6 of us in a boardroom. It was a team meeting. My boss at the time, he asked, what do you think our next step should be here? I was talking about a particular project at the time. And so I gave my answer. I think I spoke for a couple minutes. And when I finished, he said, yeah, but Ty, what do you think our next step should be? And he said it in such a way that I wouldn't recommend leaders speak like that. But he said it in such a way that really stuck with me, because I realized, even though he was a little maybe aggressive with his tone, I actually hadn't been clear in giving the next step. I actually hadn't really answered the question. I'd said a bunch of words, but I hadn't really been clear or concise or easy to understand. So something that all of us can do is we can start organizing our thoughts and ideas a little bit more clearly. So I'll give a framework that's really easy for anyone to start using. It's called point, reason, point. Okay, so PRP. So for this, we start with our main point. So basically, what's the main message here? What's the main thing that we're trying to say? So if I was answering the question, what should our next step be? I would say that our next step should be to reach out to this person. Okay. Now, the reason, the second step here is why do I think this? So why do I actually believe this point? Why is this the next step? Okay. So continuing with that example, I'd say it would be best to reach out to this person because they've helped us out a lot in the past. They've been a key decision maker on similar projects like this. And overall, they're probably going to be our best chance of moving things forward. Okay, so now I'm giving some reasons here. And then restating that main point, I'd say that's why X would be the best person to reach out to. So starting with the point, then stating the reasons, giving some explanation. Now you can get a little bit longer in here. Maybe you give an example to help support your point. Maybe give some evidence. Maybe you have a few reasons. That's all great. But as long as you're restating that point at the end, just so it's super clear for everyone, thinking of what you're saying with some sort of structure or some organization like this makes such a big difference. Because otherwise you're kind of just throwing spaghetti at the wall sometimes, hoping something sticks, words come out. It's good sometimes, it's not as good other times, and you're just really rolling the dice. Versus when you have something to follow like this, like a point, reason, point, you'll find that it's just so much easier to not only organize those thoughts and ideas when speaking so that others understand you, it's also so much easier for you to explain yourself. So point, reason, point.
I love that framework. And I know I've personally been victim of what I like to call word vomit. It's so gross, but that's just what I've always called it. And I'm curious, where do you think that comes from? Does it come from a place of nervous energy? Does it come from a place of like imposter syndrome and wanting to impress the person you're talking about? Very specific examples, because clearly I'm speaking from experience, but just curious from your perspective, where you find that most often comes from.
Definitely, a lot of times it is that nervous energy, and it's wanting to impress or wanting to say something smart, wanting to sound good. And then so we think if we just say a lot of things, hopefully something will sound good. But the nerves is certainly a big part of it, because usually then people will talk a little bit faster, right? They say a bunch of different stuff, but they're saying it very quickly. There's not very many pauses. And so typically in those situations, you just kind of want to get it out. And so when you're forcing all of it out, it comes out fast, comes out quick, kind of like the vomit that you're talking about, right? I think that's probably where it comes from, where we're just kind of spewing stuff out, and it's usually not very good stuff. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a combination of both.
Yeah. So I had a supervisor who prided himself on, this is not here at Trail, years ago, who prided himself pretty vocally on his ability to present info that the masses melt for. That was actually his words. Oh yeah, the masses melt for whenever I talk. And the irony is that we would regularly leave those meetings going, okay, and we're like messaging each other going, okay, what are we supposed to do now? Or what's the next thing we're supposed to be jumping into and doing? And it was interesting to look at that experience and think about, if I were in that place of where I feel super confident about my messaging and how I'm communicating out, I should probably do some self-analysis. I really believe it, and it's important to like stop every once in a while to just analyze yourself and look at where I need to be, where I should be, where I'm not. If someone is feeling pretty confident already, what's a place that maybe we should do a little bit of self-analysis? Where should we look at? And maybe what we should be looking for specifically in the way we're communicating and where it's not resonating well.
Well, first, it sounds like he knew how to speak so that the masses melted, but the masses did not understand. So it's very important that both are at play here, because it's a good question. You could be very confident and have a lot of amazing things to say, valuable things to say, but if people aren't really clear, or it's not very easy to absorb what you're saying, then you're not really able to have the impact that you want to have. So let's say you are confident, and this is something that actually a lot of my extrovert clients find, is that they initially think, yeah, I'm comfortable with speaking, I'm pretty confident, so therefore I am good at it. But being comfortable doesn't mean you're skilled. Okay, so something you could look for is, how are people responding to you? If you explain things to someone, do they then act on it in accordance to what you said? Are they taking action the way that you want them to? You can try asking them questions like, what are your main takeaways from that? Making sure that they actually are absorbing what you're saying. And also just keep an eye out. Are people listening closely to you? Are they kind of zoning out? What are their body language reactions, right? Are their kind of arms crossed? Do they seem closed off? Are they looking away? I would be aware of just how people are responding, and also how people are actually using the information that you're giving them.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate that big time. And that was something that we found from a number of times, that the message would melt the masses, but to your point, not the right type of melting was going on.
Brain melt.
Right, exactly. And it was always like, well, you didn't listen, right? You didn't listen to me, what I was saying. Like, well, we're trying to, right? So I love those points of like stopping, thinking, asking the feedback questions, the takeaways. That's really valuable information. So thank you, Ty.
Speaking of how people respond, though, is anyone unsure what the Slack thumbs up means? Is it an okay? Is it sarcasm? Is it an approval? Are you mad at me? Like, I'm really not sure, and I need to know what you guys think of that.
You almost need like a legend for that, right? Like the thumbs up, like fist bump, these mean good, right?
Apparently, though, because I used to use the fist bump all the time, and that's like a face punch, actually. So
I use the fist bump all the time, even in my like texting, commenting on social media posts. Like, I love the fist bump. I don't believe there's that many people that would think it's a face punch. If they do, I think they would be, reasonable enough to understand that obviously I'm not punching them in the face, especially based on my likely supportive or helpful comments. So I really hope people don't think that, because the fist bump is one of my favorite emojis.
As long as we're all collectively agreeing that the thumbs up is sarcasm.
I still like a thumbs up occasionally.
Like, okay.
I haven't surveyed this, though, so maybe I need to stop using it.
We're going to make it definitive right here on Inside the Process. The fist bump is cool. Thumbs up is like, yeah, there we go. That's gospel now. There you go.
That's going to be my big takeaway from this. I should use the thumbs up less. It's funny, just really quick. I actually, if anyone uses an iPhone, I'm not sure if you can do this on Android, but you can add shortcuts, essentially like text replacement shortcuts. So if I just type in the letter T on my phone, it just makes the thumbs up emoji right away. If I type in just the letter F, it replaces it with the fist bump emoji right away. So if you want to save time and you use emojis when you're texting, just replace one letter with the emoji, and then boom, you can add your favorite emojis so much faster.
That's awesome.
Tech tip. I love it.
Yeah, that's great. Efficient
communication. You heard it here, folks.
But a really good point to bring up here, because we do a lot of communication now via instant messaging, Slack, text, and whatever. Again, owing to what we talked about already, is that we need to provide clarity around what those symbols may mean. Because to your point, Mallory, to you, a thumbs up may mean like, I'm sort of sarcastic, but someone else like, no, hey, big thumbs up, way to go. So it's pretty crucial that we're very clear within our own organizations, and that could change from one to the other. So good thing to be aware of, as we go through. So good call out. Love that. So Ty, it's probably fair to assume that when people come to you, they are usually they've already come to terms with the fact that they have some things they need to fix in their communication, and that it could use a little bit of work. That's why they're coming to you in the first place. What do you recommend that folks do to assess their own communication skills? Is it a question during like performance review time? Is it more peer feedback? Is it self-assessment? Where does that fit in to someone's progress in bettering their communication skills?
This is really important. A lot of people avoid analyzing themselves when it comes to their speaking. The amount of times that I've had clients say, oh, I just really don't want to record myself. I hate watching myself back. That's exactly why you need to do it. You need to know how you look, how you sound, how you're speaking in a lot of these situations. So something that you can do, the quickest and most effective way would be working with a coach. But if you want to start on your own, definitely just record yourself in some of your daily meetings, right? Really easy if you're on a video call to record those. And for whatever reason, maybe you can't record from your computer, you can actually just prop up your phone right beside your computer. So just prop it up against a water bottle or something, have it facing you. And that way you're actually only recording yourself too. Now watch that back, see, okay, for the parts that I was speaking there, how did I look? What was I doing with my body language? Was I doing some weird stuff with my hands? Was I kind of fidgeting back and forth? Was I kind of looking all around the room? Or was I, pretty stationary, good upright posture? Was I looking at the camera some of the time, looking at the screen some of the other time? So you look at your body language first, because a lot of people notice they're doing weird little fidgets or things that they don't like. And first, you got to know what you're doing before you can fix those. And the second, obviously, you want to listen to your voice. How do you sound? Are you speaking really quick? Are you talking too quiet at certain times when you might be kind of like unsure of yourself, like this? You might not even know that you're doing these things. You could be going up in pitch at the end of a sentence sometimes, like this, and not even know it. Now, we talked about body language and voice, but then naturally you want to think, okay, if I was listening to this, would I understand what I was saying? What is my main point? Is this clear to everyone listening? So it's really good to see, am I talking with any type of structure and that people can actually understand me? Or does it sound like I'm just kind of rambling? This can be not a fun way, but this can be a very useful way of seeing, do I word vomit? When do I word vomit? These are good things to know, because then you can actually start building the skills and fixing this type of stuff. So record yourself. That's going to be number one. You had mentioned, Shawn, too, about, do I ask for feedback from others? Is it a performance review type of thing? It can be. You can ask. But I'd be a little bit more careful with this one in terms of who you ask, because there's a couple of reasons why this may not be the most effective way. First, people aren't really paying that much attention to the way that you're speaking. They're more focused on themselves and how do they sound, how do they look. So they might not actually be watching close enough or listening close enough to give you anything useful. The second is that most people avoid giving feedback back because they don't want to hurt your feelings. And it's so much easier just to say, yeah, you're a pretty good speaker. Yeah, no, you're all good, not bad, right? Versus actually like taking the time to dig in. Here's where you need to improve. When you do this, you sound like this. People don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and it's so much easier for them just to say, yeah, you're doing good, and then move on with their day, right? The third is, it's a little bit subjective in that, let's say they haven't really learned much about communication. They might actually think you're good when you're not. And I say that because when I first started learning about communication early in my career, I just made a little bit of progress. I gave a presentation at work that I knew was trash. I knew it was not good. I was not a good speaker at this point. But there were a couple people that said, yeah, it was pretty good. I like the way you speak. It all made sense, and you have a good cadence to your voice. I didn't. None of those things were true. But just because I was slightly better than them and they were not good, they thought I was good. So if I'd absorbed that and been like, well, I'm great, awesome, I'll just take that in, because nobody said any of the bad stuff. So I say this just to say, be very careful in who you ask. Ask like 5 to 10 people. Maybe then you can start to make some judgments, and you can, pick and choose based on the person. But don't just blindly follow what 1 or 2 people say, because people that you work with aren't really going to be the best sources of advice most of the time for this.
Okay, there's several things that you brought out there that I want to call out, because I really appreciate that particular piece of feedback right there. I've experienced this before where same situation. I've shared something and I felt like, yeah, it was all right. And someone was like, that was amazing. But I knew it wasn't as all right as I wanted it to be. So choosing carefully the people that you are asking for feedback, probably looking for the people that you know are skilled speakers or skilled communicators, and getting that feedback from them is a good way to go. I also appreciated the advice to record yourself. I have long suggested this when I used to work with teachers in the time when ed tech was really starting to bloom and people were starting to use video cameras and more, and teachers were like, I'm never doing that. And so I'd coach them on how to actually record themselves. And when you listen to yourself back, listen back to yourself, one of them, one thing is it can be pretty horrifying sometimes, and something most people like, I don't want to listen to myself talk. But I do feel that that's one of the absolute best ways to get better at communicating, because you are your own worst critic in both negative and positive ways. So it's a matter of tempering down the negative, but identifying what those issues are that you need to fix. And boy, once you watch yourself talk and you are able to catch those pointers, you start to see things that you would never have seen even if you would have asked people to provide the feedback. So I really love that advice. It's something I follow as well. And one thing I noticed that you do, I've already noticed this through this conversation so far, that I really appreciate as well, as you're a very calculated speaker, where you're okay taking small pauses and thinking before responding. And I think that's a real key. One thing that we can all do is look at our communication patterns and figure out, hey, am I just mushing things together? Am I melting the masses, or am I taking time in between for both me, my physical body to take a breath, and my brain to take a break for a moment before I move on with the next thought? So I appreciate that as something you do, something I need to do a little bit better. So I appreciate that advice.
So, Ty, if you are on the receiving end of a bad communicator and you feel like you actually do have good feedback to give and it feels pretty direct, and you don't want to be mean, but you feel a calling to really give this feedback, any tips for folks that are listening today that maybe are sitting on the edge of feeling like, hey, I need to deliver this feedback, and maybe a framework that you can provide them on how to do that effectively? Or is it just that they go back to that PRP method?
Yeah, I would just tell them they're horrible and that they need to be better, and then walk away.
That's pretty effective usually.
Let them figure it out. Hope for the best. No, in all seriousness, first we want to make sure that they're actually open to receiving feedback. So this is actually a good way to actually get people to listen to you a little bit more when you're giving it. So first say, hey, I noticed something about your speaking there. Are you open to receiving a bit of feedback? Right? Because if they're verbally acknowledging yes, they're actually going to more likely absorb what you say after. And that way we're it's respectful to check first too before we just give someone unsolicited advice. So you say yes, I'm open to feedback. Then there's a nice little feedback framework that I'll share, which is behavior, outcome, future action. So the behavior, let's say they were speaking too fast and it's kind of tough to understand them. So you could say, in that meeting we had earlier in the afternoon, when you were talking about X, it seemed like you were talking a lot quicker than usual, and the pace was kind of tough to keep up with. So that would be the behavior. That's what they were doing. So we're separating the behavior from the person. That's important. And then the outcome, so we could say, when the pace was a little too quick like that, it was kind of tough to understand you, and it seemed like you had some good points in there, but it just wasn't very easy to really absorb what all those points were. Okay, so that's the outcome. Now, the future action would be kind of like the suggestion that you're giving. So you could say, the next time, you could try maybe taking a couple more pauses so we have a little more time to absorb what you're saying, and just slowing down the pace a little bit more, because you're giving such great points. It would be awesome if we could really take them in and understand them even better. So you got behavior, outcome, future action.
We use something super similar to that here at Trainual, and it's called BIC. So it's behavior, impact, identical to behavior and outcome. But the last one is question, which I think is really close to the future element of yours. And it's just reframing it like a question. So instead of giving like the direct feedback, which I think works great, it's just, I guess, a different way of doing it where you're asking a question, which I think helps when you're coaching people. And it's like the same idea, but you would have them kind of figure it out themselves. So it's framing that future piece as a question instead. So like, how do you think you might be able to improve in this specific area next time when you're speaking? And then if they can't figure it out, it opens the conversation to, well, I have some ideas and here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, love it. That's absolutely perfect. Yeah, I'm on board.
I love that. I think those are both really solid frameworks for folks. But I want to shift gears here, and I want you to close your eyes, just picture something with me. So you're in the hot seat, all eyes on you. You're sweating. You've got tunnel vision. Your heart is just beating out of your chest. And hopefully I'm not about to like trigger people that are listening right now into like having a full-on panic attack. But as if the panic could get any worse, all the prep you've done up to this point for this big presentation you're about to give is totally erased by your survival instinct. Your mind goes completely blank, and you're like, oh no, what the heck do I do? What do I say? And I feel like I can describe this rather vividly because it's something that I have dealt with for years. And it seems like there's been very little advice over the years that has worked. But I feel like you've had hundreds of happy clients who you've helped through this very thing. And so I want to ask you today to help us understand how you coach leaders from that, oh, I'm having a full panic attack in front of my executive leadership team or the board members or this big audience that paid to have a ticket to be here, to, oh, I've got this. And these people are about to learn today.
That was almost too vivid. I hope we do a positive one after this where we can like imagine ourselves crushing it on stage or something like that. I feel like I'm in the moment now. Let's see what type of answer I give after that visualization. That was well done. So firstly, I do lots of different things with clients to help them avoid this. So we'll cover a couple main ones. The first would be, how can we kind of change the way that we approach speaking before these types of situations? Right? So if a person's mind is going blank and they're feeling all that pressure, they're so nervous, they're really worried about performing, right? They're worried about doing an exceptional job. If they were just practicing in their living room with no one around, I'm not sure that anyone's ever frozen up in their living room practicing and their mind's gone blank and they're sweating, right? So what's really the difference here? Well, it's really the frame of practice versus performance. So this is actually a reframe that's really transformed the way I view speaking and the way a lot of my clients view speaking. So I initially discovered this many years ago. I was actually watching a sports psychology video on YouTube. I don't know how I stumbled across this. You know, the algorithm kind of just takes you to interesting places sometimes.
Cat videos mostly.
And yeah. And I believe it was Dr. Alan Goldberg was this guy's name. And he was talking about how athletes perform so much better in practice. But then when they get to these big games, that's when you'll hear about this person choked or they couldn't make a shot or they're fumbling and all these different things are going wrong. And I thought pretty deeply about this. And so I started implementing some of these techniques with work situations. And over time with my clients' work situations. So imagine you have a big meeting or a big presentation, whatever it might be. But if you're just going in there to practice speaking in meetings, if you're just going up there to practice giving presentations, if you are telling yourself that over and over leading up to it, you're going to approach it significantly different. Right? So let's say I was super nervous to record this podcast episode with you. I could say, well, I'm just going to practice being better at being a podcast guest. Now, this takes a lot of the, I really need to perform. I need to say all the perfect things. I need to be amazing up there. It takes a lot of that out of it, which then reduces the pressure so much because it's not really something where the outcome is even relevant. If you're just going to practice, it doesn't really matter, right? If you mess up a little bit, it's fine. It's just practice. Okay, and so when you think of it like that, the cool part is that you're actually going to perform much better. So practice versus performance is a really, really crucial mindset shift that has worked extremely well for both myself and many others. And then let's say now you're like right about to go on stage, you're right about to have the meeting. There's a really practical 4-step process that I'll teach here. Takes 20 seconds-ish, 20 to 30 seconds. So you can do this anywhere, anytime. And there's actually a lot of science behind these 4 steps. You've probably heard of all of them, but when we put them together, it's actually scientifically proven to be the fastest way to shift your state from anxious, nervous, stressed, to calm, focused, relaxed. So it's an acronym. It's SBVS. So the first S is sit up straight. Lots of connection between our state of mind and our body language. So just making sure that your shoulders are nice and down and back. Sitting up straight, your head's up. If you want to test this out, even as a listener, try making yourself really small and kind of curling up into a ball and see how you feel like that emotionally and in terms of your state of mind versus being upright, head up, chest open, shoulders down and back. Huge difference in the way that you feel. So first, you want to make sure your body language is optimized. Sit up straight. Second is breathe, but it's not just any type of breath. The breath you want to do is called the physiological sigh. So Andrew Huberman, famous neuroscientist, a lot of us know and love now, he actually popularized this. The physiological sigh is a double inhale through the nose, one long, then one short, and then an extended exhale through the mouth. So long inhale through the nose. If you're listening, do this with us. Long inhale through the nose. Short little inhale through the nose to get a little bit more air. And then extended exhale through the mouth. So you only have to do 2 of those to shift your state. Tons of research behind that. One of the best ways to breathe. And then you're sitting up straight. You're doing your breaths. As you're doing these breaths, you want to visualize one of 2 things. It can be the situation going well. So imagining yourself confidently delivering the speech or speaking in that meeting. Or it can be just anything that brings you joy. So the whole idea here is we can't actually be thinking of 2 opposite things at once, right? So if you're thinking of, your pet that you love or your child or your partner, whoever it might be, or a vacation, if you're thinking of all these things or whichever one actually brings you the most joy, while you're doing your breaths and you're sitting up straight, you're really changing your state of mind to a place that's going to be a lot more conducive to you being relaxed, speaking better, thinking more clearly, being more confident. So we've got SBV, and then the final S is actually just smile. So smiling should be easy if you've been visualizing something that brings you joy or the situation going well. But even if you have to kind of force the smile at first, there's all these good neurological chemicals, the dopamine, the serotonin that get released when you do something even just simple, like smiling. So when we do these together, you can see you can actually do all of them basically at the same time. So we're sitting up straight, we're doing our breaths, we're visualizing either the outcome that we want or something that brings us joy, and then we're allowing a smile to cross our face. So you can do that backstage, you can do that in the bathroom beforehand. Any of that works great to really shift your state quickly, because you'll find when you're not taking the situation as seriously because it's practice, and then you're in that wonderful optimized state of mind when you're in there, the chances of you actually freaking out or getting a panic attack or getting super stressed, it's going to be 90% lower. It's a very slim chance of that happening if you primed yourself that way. And the last thing I'll say about this is you can actually do the breaths silently. So if you're waiting for your turn to speak in the meeting, people are actually around. Yeah, you're not going to close your eyes and visualize, but you can do the breaths, and that works extremely well just on its own.
Yeah. So I feel like you wanted the positive analogy. There it was right there. That was amazing. And I've actually been breathing that way all the way through this since I learned that. So, Mallory, we have no excuses going forward. Like, Inside the Process continues to be like even better every time because we're going to be that much more confident and breathing and thinking about our positive experience. So I appreciate that one big time.
I love it. I've actually never heard anyone describe what I've always known to be my biggest struggle when it comes to speaking or performing at any capacity. And you did it so beautifully. And I want to give you two examples for why I feel this way. The first is that I've always said it doesn't matter if I'm speaking to an audience of 500 people. Like, I could care less. I'm going to do great. I'm going to blow it out of the water. But the second you tell me that the boss, like the owner of our company or my boss is in the audience, or my best friend, or somebody that I feel like I need to impress or perform for, that's when I start to feel like that panic and the dizzy feeling and the tunnel vision and the, oh my gosh, I forget everything that I'm supposed to talk about. And the second example of this, where I really noticed the pattern, I do mixed martial arts, and part of that is that I compete professionally in like grappling games. And so the first time that I ever competed, I was fine. But the minute I stepped on the mat and saw my coaches around the mat and like people that I knew, I started to have a full-blown panic attack. And I did well. I won gold, but I told my coach after that, man, I feel like I performed at 60% of how I do when I'm in the gym. And I don't feel like I truly earned that win. It just so happened, no offense to the other gal, but that she just, wasn't as good as I was, because I definitely was not in it 100%, because I was fighting myself at the same time. I was quite literally fighting her. And I feel like you explained that in a way that just really spoke to me, and really, like, I'm going to walk away from this feeling like, man, you just like spoke to my heart. But I'm curious if you have any insight into how you can combat that specifically, or if that practice is really truly how you solve that needing to impress others or perform for people that you know.
It really comes down to what we're focusing on. Because if you're focusing on trying to look good, or trying to sound good, or trying to do something very specifically, instead of just showing up and doing the things that you already know, you're not really learning new things when you're already up there, right? You're implementing the things that you've already practiced. So thinking about just being more present and literally telling yourself, this is just practice. I'm just practicing. In your case, you're grappling. Side note, very impressive. Mallory's out here winning golds at 60% performance.
In hindsight, that sounds super douchey, but
I wish I could win golds at 60% of anything. That's very impressive. Yeah, so I want to recognize you for that. Good on you. Imagine you at 100%. You'd just be out here crushing everyone.
That's so helpful. I'm definitely going to, I think, meditate on some of the things that you shared today, because I think they're going to be super powerful for people. That said, let's just rip another Band-Aid off here and talk about the confidence killer that's probably plaguing over half of our listeners right now. And that is imposter syndrome, which I feel like we've touched on a little bit. But it's that voice in your head that pipes up as you're about to speak, and it's whispering something in your ear like, excuse me, who the heck do you think you are? I will personally say that I suffer from the how hard could it be gene, which makes me believe that I can do just about anything except for public speaking. But a lot of that comes from my confidence in other areas outside of the unknown. So my ability to figure it out and be resourceful and just roll up my sleeves. But I'm wondering what some of the ways are that we can show up like the badasses that we are, no matter how much we feel like we're totally outside of the bounds of our comfort zone.
Imposter syndrome is kind of an interesting topic because we hear a lot about it and we're always talking about overcoming it. But it's kind of a valid thing. I don't find a problem with it a lot of times because most of the people that I've spoken to that have it or have dealt with it, it's kind of justified, right? If you're nervous to speak on stage, but maybe you've only spoken on a few stages in your life, of course it makes sense you would be nervous and you feel like you don't really quite belong because you actually don't, but that's fine. You're not going to belong anywhere, somewhere that you've never been before. So I actually think it's really totally okay to feel that imposter syndrome and just realize, yeah, that's kind of part of the process here. If you've done something 100 times and you still feel it, okay, yeah, let's do some work on this. But until you've done something 100 times and you are almost bored of it because you're so used to it, I think it's fine and actually not a problem. It's just kind of part of the process. But if we want to get tactical and think, okay, how can I at least relieve some of those symptoms so I at least don't feel as fearful, as nervous, or as stressed because of the imposter syndrome? One thing that a lot of my clients find helpful and something that really was a big shift for me was just focusing on how can I give something or help the people that are listening just in any type of way. So if I'm speaking about something and maybe I haven't spoken to this big of a group before, or maybe it's something I don't think I'm an expert in yet, I like to think, okay, just on the chance maybe I know a little bit more than someone there, then actually I'd be helping them by sharing this. So even if there's a small chance, I actually think it's a disservice not to show up and not to say anything and not to share your thoughts and share your value. Because even if you help one person there and everyone else, you're just giving a good reminder to, because sometimes we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. Then if you think about it like that, and the goal is just to help, but then you place the barrier of entry for helping really low, then that can really help kind of ease some of the pressure and ease some of the nerves. Whereas maybe it's okay that I don't feel like I belong here yet, but I'm just trying to help a little bit, and anyone that I help, that's a win.
I wrote this down. Feeling like an imposter is part of the process until you've done it 100 times and have an actual process. I feel like that is the most inside the process thing that we've heard on this show. So I love that so much.
You've said this in different ways several times, but I really love this direction whenever we're trying to improve something in what we do. It's really easy and really overwhelming to look at the whole thing you've got to fix versus looking at these little micro items like what you're talking about. I subscribe to the idea of just every day get 1% better at something. Right? If you're going to go give a speech, I love that direction of going, give one person something valuable that they can take and use and apply in their own life. That's really powerful and a lot more. It gives you a lot more confidence to be able to do that one thing. I can focus on this one thing. That's how human beings learn anyway. We learn in small little chunks, and we're able to make the greatest progress when we achieve those small little chunks. So that's great direction, great advice to focus on those smaller things, whether it's in your imposter syndrome or whether it's your clarity or whether it's how you're communicating in a meeting with your team. What's 1% better that you can do that will have a greater impact as you continue on. So I appreciate that big time, Ty. I had this conversation with my 17-year-old son who just started his senior year today. Whatever reason, that's crazy. I've got a senior in high school. I'm not that old enough to do that. But we're having this conversation about how when we talk and when we share things from our own perspective more often than not. And that people may receive those things from us the way we convey them, but more often there are variations in how they perceive what we say. And when you've got a room of 20 people who are all perceiving maybe similar or maybe totally different things, that can very easily lead to some of this lack of clarity that we sometimes see and that we've talked about a little bit already. So how can leaders develop their active listening skills and become more emotionally intelligent about the situation that's going on and how they are conveying their messages to whoever's receiving them, their audience?
This is really important because we've talked about a few ways of how to be clear if we are the one speaking, right? Making sure that others understand us, stating our points, using frameworks, giving reasons for our points. But we actually haven't yet talked about, let's say we're on the other side, right? And we're making sure that we understand others while we're listening. So it's a good question. My favorite way to get better at this is to really get in the habit of paraphrasing. So paraphrasing, as we may or may not know, is really just stating our understanding of what someone said back to them. But there's a few ways that people can do this a little bit off or in a way that may not be as well received. So we'll talk about how not to paraphrase first, and that's to make it about yourself. So if I say, well, what I'm hearing you say is this, or my understanding is this, then it kind of makes it about me, right? And people aren't as receptive to these kind of me or I statements, especially when we're trying to get understanding. So my favorite way to paraphrase is with "it sounds like." So it sounds like, and then whatever your understanding is. Now, this is great because it's just all about what's being said. It's not about you. And the nice thing about paraphrasing in this way is that you're either going to get confirmed or you're going to get corrected. So either way you win. Because if you paraphrase and you're a little bit off, they'll say, well, actually, it's more like this. You get corrected. Or if you're bang on, they'll say, yes, that's right. You get confirmed. So it doesn't actually matter if your paraphrase is right, wrong, off, on. Because either way, if you're right, people are going to say yes very quickly, but people love to correct, don't they? We love to correct others. It's hard not to. So sometimes a person may not be actually explaining something very clearly. Maybe they haven't learned PRP. Maybe they haven't learned organizing their thoughts and ideas. So you then saying, okay, it sounds like this is going to be one of the best ways to really learn what they mean, because they'll say, here's actually what I meant. And so I wouldn't complicate it any more than that. Just it sounds like, and then your understanding, and you can do that as many times as you need.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it goes back to the feedback you were talking about earlier, taking it away from the person or or you or them, and market it just around the thing that we are trying to get clarity on. That's awesome.
Absolutely. And with this, it's a really good way of sometimes getting, that deeper information that a person may not be disclosing at first. So it can be kind of a sneaky way to get more information from someone too.
Well, and being able to clearly understand how they're receiving that message, right? Because that can shift the directions sometimes that you go in, the way you say things or what you actually say, if you can be that aware of the way they're receiving the information. So that's such a valuable skill. It helps you to be way more focused and way more concise in how you deliver your communication.
Absolutely.
All right, Ty. We got to wrap this up, but let's do it with a wild one. Are you ready? Okay. If you could Freaky Friday, okay, aka swap minds, with one amazing communicator and someone who notoriously sucks at it, who would you choose and why? And more importantly, what do you think would be the wildest outcome? I'll give you an example. We don't get political on this show, so I'm not going to be specific, okay? But if we could put Phil Dunphy for president, I think that would be hilarious. And it would probably be just as chaotic, but with the most heart and hilarity ever in the history of the United States. So that's my vote.
I'm a big Modern Family fan, so I love the Phil Dunphy reference.
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was going to land in the UK. I was like, what if he just blankly stares at me and doesn't know who my precious Phil Dunphy is? I'd be so sad.
He's actually my favorite character on the show, too. I relate to his humor. His name's also Ty in real life, I believe.
Yeah.
Which I connect with.
Liberal.
It's funny when you said we don't get political, because you had mentioned a communicator that is not very skilled, and obviously there's a particular person that came to mind right off the bat. But okay, let me think of a really good communicator. Actually, this is somebody in the political sphere. His name is Vivek Ramaswamy. So he actually ran for the Republican side. I think he got like third in the running or something like that. But this man is one of the best speakers I've ever heard. So if you haven't listened to Vivek Ramaswamy, just type in VIVEK on YouTube and he'll likely pop up. He's just so fluent with the way that he speaks. He's very articulate. He makes good points. He responds very compassionately and empathetically to tough questions. Just such a fluent speaker on the spot. It's absolutely unbelievable. So I would swap him with, I'm going to say Elon Musk. Not that Elon is a terrible communicator, but he's not necessarily like a fast, fluent speaker like some people are. And so I think it'd be really interesting to swap them, because Vivek speaks quickly. He's very articulate. He'll just smoothly flow and just not ramble off, but just make such very clear points one by one at a time. So I think it'd be interesting with Elon's brilliant, wild brain to see him speak really quick like that and just see how it comes out. So that's the first thing that came to mind. I'd be swapping Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. That's what popped up for me.
That's hilarious. You want to hear something even funnier? I had Elon Musk and Phil Dunphy first, and I crossed off Elon and changed it for U.S. president, because I was like, there's like some similarities between Phil and Elon. I don't know if those are far enough apart from each other. But I love your suggestion. That is hilarious. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Inside the Process. As always, we'll have a process template for listeners to use in their business or to use just personally on how to communicate clearly and confidently. As always, document your processes and be a good human. That is all for us today. Thanks for listening.